Hey, welcome back to the shop. This is Zach over at NV Woodworks. Today I'm going to be talking about how to properly measure and mix Alumilite. Now, I've gotten quite a few questions lately about, people that are just starting out and they got their first 32 ounces of Alumilite and they, mixed it up and then cast it, and the casting came out not right. It's not the results that they wanted. So I wanted to cover this because usually when people say they have issues, maybe it's like a hazy kind of color in the clear resin or curing issues or something like that. Usually what it boils down to is one of two things. One, measuring. If you're not using a scale, a lot of people get into this and they think, oh, it's 1-to-1 ratio. So they pull out a cup and they have equal parts and they pour them together. That's not how you do it, and it's not like a recommendation to use a scale. It's a necessity. You need to use a scale when you're measuring Alumilite. So the scale that I use, I like getting scales that are accurate to the 1/10 of a gram. Now what that allows you to do is it allows you to do small amounts, because that's another issue. Is people say, well, I got my scale and everything's going great, but what they've done is they've mixed 20 grams total of resin, and they're using a scale that is accurate to the nearest gram, one whole gram. Well, if you're only mixing 20 ounces of resin and with error built in from your scale, let's say that you're off half a gram or 3/4 of a gram out of 20, that's a significant percentage. It's going to screw up the mixture. Now, if you're doing something like this, this is 6 blanks, 6 pen blanks is what I can get out of this. It's about 540 grams. That's about what I measure for that size mold. Well, half a gram out of 540 is not going to change anything. So that's, the difference. If you're doing very small things, you better have a 1/10 gram scale. Otherwise, it's going to fluctuate. That's actually what's going to happen is people get inconsistent results and they're doing very small amounts, and that's the reason, because their scale isn't accurate enough to get, consistently similar measurements when they're doing that stuff. So first things first, get a scale, and again, I would really recommend you get the 1/10 gram accurate scale. The only drawback to getting a more accurate scale is usually they won't weigh as much weight in total, but if you're using it for this type of stuff, I don't think that you're going to reach the limits anytime. I have never done that with this scale. So the other thing that I like about having a very accurate scale is I often mix dyes together. And so, I'll take, red, and let's say I want, 10-to-1 or something like that, red to blue. Well, if I have to use a scale that's to the closest gram, you're going to get very inconsistent results. And what part of my business model is making blanks that have very accurate colors. So I like having that accuracy, and I can do smaller amounts with dyes and just get them more accurate. So that's kind of another benefit that doesn't really have as much to do with the resin casting side of this, or getting good results with the resin. But I think it's a good benefit to getting a scale that's more accurate. Now, the second issue that usually people run into when they're having issues, maybe with hazy castings or whatever, is they're not mixing properly. And, a lot of people say, well, I mixed for 2 minutes, or, I mixed for whatever. I don't care how long you're mixing it if you're not mixing it properly. And it's not hard or anything like that, but there is some technique to it. A lot of people come from like the epoxy side of things and they move into Alumilite. Well, epoxy sets so slow that it makes sense to try and mix it slowly. It's not like it's going to set up on you anytime soon. And there's no reason to introduce more air bubbles than you have to while you're mixing. So they mix real slow. Don't do that with Alumilite. You're gonna get air bubbles in it no matter what, and you're gonna have to use a pressure pot. So I just mix vigorously. Now I don't want the stuff splashing out of the cup, but I ain't gonna be driving Miss Daisy with my mixing stick. The other thing is you need to scrape the sides very well and the bottom of the cup. What happens is you add your part A, you pump a few pumps in here, and what happens is that part A is going to grab onto the walls of the cup, or whatever part, whichever one you put in there first is going to be kind of up against the walls and the bottom. Then you put in the part B and you mix. And you know, one thing is I have the stick all the way on the bottom of the cup. I'm not mixing halfway in. I have the stick all the way to the bottom of the cup, and I'm mixing. And then I stop and I do about 3 or 4 times. I go around the walls. What's happening is you need to get that part A, whatever you put in the cup first that kind of stuck to the walls, you need to get that off the walls. The other thing is, if you have ridges of any kind in your cup, if you have a significant amount of ridges in a cup, I would just not use those anymore. Get as smooth, you know, the sides, get it as smooth as possible. Try not to have too much of this lettering stuff. This I don't particularly like, but I haven't had issues with it myself. If you really want a very smooth cup, these paint mixing cups are usually dead straight. There's none of that ridges and stuff in them. And they do come in different sizes. The only issue is they're more expensive. And so as long as you're reusing them, great. But you know, sometimes you mess them up. They crack or whatever. So I usually just use these solo cups for the most part, and they work fine. The other thing I recommend is getting a clear cup. It helps to be able to see the resin, because that's another indication that you can use. You'll know by looking at the resin when it's done. You know, again, it's not a time thing. It doesn't. 3 minutes of mixing is not necessarily going to get you where you want to be, but you usually can look in the cup, and right when you start adding the second part in, you'll notice that there's kind of wispy trails of the two. They haven't fully mixed yet. And then even after you've been mixing for quite a while, you'll see small little wisps, trails dragging around when you're mixing. You do not want any of those. If you see that in your cup, it's not mixed properly. It's not finished yet. So using the clear resin, it should be dead clear, and you'll see a bunch of air bubbles. It'll look kind of like champagne. But there should be no wispy trails of anything in the cup. Once those are all gone, then you know you're ready to go. You can start pouring into your molds. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do 2 castings, and it's just all I'm doing is dead clear resin. I'm not putting any dyes or doing anything. I'm just going to show you, get good camera angles of the resin, what it looks like, and my technique, what I'm doing. Again, I don't think that I do anything spectacular or special, but I think some people may benefit to see, what I do and then just mimic that, because it should get you the results that you need. So hopefully I can get really good shots. I'm going to try and do some editing where it's like side by side, where you can see me, what I'm doing, and have a good shot of the resin. So I'm going to get the cameras all closer here, and we're going to start doing the pour. Now, one thing to note, I'm not going to focus heavily on the weight. It's just a simple matter. You need to get an accurate scale, and it needs to be, you need to get it equal parts. That's it. So I'm not going to really focus too much on that. But main thing is seeing what I'm doing when I'm mixing. That's, I think, the important thing. All right, so I'm going to start with part A, and again, these tubes take around about 100 grams, a little less than 100 grams each. So I'm going to need, I got 2 of them, so I'm going to need 100 grams of A, 100 grams of B. So I'm going to weigh that. And again, I really try to get it exactly at 100.0 grams. No reason not to when you have a good accurate scale. There we go. Now, I use a wooden popsicle stick. In some areas, if you have high humidity, you may not want to use wood. It may have too much moisture in it. That's actually the other issue that you can have with Alumilite is water. You do not want to use anything that has water in it, and you don't want to embed green or wet wood. You really actually want like 0% moisture content wood if you're embedding. I actually bake wood. I actually stabilize wood that I would cast, but you can get away with just putting wood in the casting, but I bake it overnight, basically 24 hours or so at 225 degrees to make sure there's about 0 moisture in there. So I got my popsicle stick and need to add the part B. I'm going to be putting it in the Harbor Freight pot that I just have sitting here for now. I don't have my second CA Technologies pot yet, and this one I don't use much, so it'll work for these. So here we go. I'm going to put the resin in here. Now I got to get my other camera screen. There we go. And with the clear resin, you got about 5 to 7 minutes. Now it's pretty hot in my shop, so I may not have that much time before it starts setting up. But I'll be able to actually calculate. I don't have a timer on hand, but I'll be able to look and see how long I'm actually doing this for, just to give you an idea. But I'm not going to be speeding through this. It's going to be live, real-time footage. So I just want to kind of go through the steps here. So here we go. And I've found that each pump is, I just estimate each pump with using the Alumilite pumps to be about 30 grams. It's a little less than that, but that allows you to do it and not go overboard. So 30 is a good estimate. And then you just creep up on it with these pumps. I don't use the pumps with Alumilite White. It's so thin that it's easy just to kind of dump it in. Now again, I'm going forward with this, and I'm going to get it to 200.0. 99.4. Just adding little drips to sneak up on this. So all I do is I'm going to mix, and I'm not going slow or anything. I'm mixing it up as good as I can. Again, I don't really want it to slosh out of the edges of the cup. In that case, you're dumping maybe part A out or whatever. So you don't want to lose resin and spill it all over the place. But I'm definitely not going slow or doing anything funny. Now, scraping the sides as much as I can. I want to make sure that I get everything off. And what I do is I try and angle this popsicle stick into the corner. That's another place, is that corner on the bottom and the sides. And I try and get that real good. And then again, when I'm stirring, I have this stick all the way to the bottom, which means that the stick is moving all the contents throughout the cup, plus scraping the bottom. And I think that really helps you to get things going. Now I'm looking at this, and it looks pretty much dead clear. I don't know if I can get a better angle of this, but there's bubbles, but there's nothing trailing around. There's no wispy things. And I don't know how long that took, but it's good. I can pour this in the tubes now. If you're going to add dye, you could do that now, whatever. But this is another reason why having a clear cup and mixing the part A and part B first, and then adding dyes and stuff, you'll be able to look at the resin and know. It's the same thing on the Alumilite White resin. That stuff just has a little bit of a different tint, but it's going to be very clear, and no trails of stuff is what you're looking for. So, this guy here, and I need to get these popped in there. I'm having some issues with these. I think when I spray these, sometimes the silicone wants to push the plugs out, so hopefully that'll stay like that. And we'll just dump it in. This will kind of give you an idea, slightly an idea of these clear PVC tubes too. I'll have a link to where I buy these. You can get them in 5-foot lengths. I believe you can also get them on eBay. I haven't personally seen them or bought them on eBay myself. But so there we have it. There's clear resin. I'm going to put this in the pressure pot. Alright, well I know this video wasn't necessarily the most exciting, but I really do hope it's helpful to especially the beginners out there, especially for the people who haven't even tried it yet, but are planning on it, thinking about it, waiting for their Alumilite in the mail. Watch this video and go, you know what, we better get a scale first. I'm going to mix and scrape the sides of the cup. Just keep those things in mind and you should get really good results. So I guess that's about it. One other thing that I wanted to mention though is, not every single problem can be boiled down to mixing and measuring. One of the biggest things that people have problems with is water. You do not want any water near Alumilite. Green wood will cause problems with Alumilite. And other things, you know, when you get into some more difficult kind of advanced casting stuff, if you're trying to cast, you know, stamp pens and, you know, like those types of things, you have to be careful with what you use as a sealant and how long you let it cure. You know, if you get foaming issues, you know, the resin foams, or, you know, it's got a kind of foaminess to it. A lot of times that means that there's some sort of water contamination. And if you get some weird hazy stuff and you've used some sort of a sealant over another type of, you know, stamps or something like that, a lot of times you didn't let that sealer cure properly. You need to probably give it, I would honestly, for stamp pens and all those types of things, to be honest, I would probably do the sealing of them and let them sit for a week just to make sure that it's not off-gassing. You know, people use CA glue, Mod Podge, and all these different types of sealers. Well, you got to make sure that's cured. Then go and cast it. So there's always other issues, you know, but for the beginners and some of the weird issues that, you know, I'm doing everything I thought I was supposed to do, maybe this, you know, make sure you're doing it with a scale, a very accurate scale if you're doing small stuff, and make sure that you're, you know, mixing very well and scraping the sides and the bottom and doing all that stuff. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave those down below. You can email me at zach@ndwoodworks.com. I'm out there on Facebook and Twitter. So yeah, thanks for watching. Again, I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.